What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined again by comic creator Mark Russell. Welcome back to the show.
Wow, thanks for having me back.
And I'm
Glad I didn't
excited.
ruin it for you the first time.
You
Willing to
didn't.
have me back.
I'm glad you're willing to come back after being on my show. This is the fourth time I've had you on the show to talk about comics with me, and I feel like next year when I ask you to come back again, I'm gonna have to give you like, what do they give in SNL? The robes? Like you're gonna
Yeah,
have
the
to have,
green jacket. You're gonna have to give me
yeah.
the green jacket.
So I'll have to
Start saving now for a
I'll
green
have to
jacket.
start saving like how much is it to make one green?
Yeah. I
But
want some like brocade, some epaulets.
it's
Special.
it's gotta be special. But no, I am excited to, like I've said before, you're one of my favorite writers. When your name is on a book, I instantly pick it up. And that sadly has become an issue for me because you write a lot of books.
Yeah. I am prolific out of sheer financial self-defense. I just gotta keep getting paid.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to hit on, it's been interesting the last couple of months as books have been coming out and things like that. Is we talked our first time about kind of how you got into comics, and you had mentioned doing that kind of serial comic strip and stuff, and then that was in the Edgar Allan Poe stuff, and then you just released it a couple months ago, the trade, with all collected, which is great. And then like one of your first works with DC was Prez, and then now that just got announced, like that's coming. Like it seems like your comics career is just like coming full circle in the last couple months, even more.
Yeah, hopefully that doesn't mean that they're done with me. Being shown the door, getting gold watched because they're bringing back these really primordial things that I created. But yeah, it's in a way sort of gratifying, but
Yeah.
also kind of surprising because I think Prez especially was the title I felt like doing kind of left for dead.
Mm.
I didn't even get to finish it. I only got to write half the issues I had planned the story for. So the idea that they would bring that back in repackaging is really nice. But at the same time, and it's sort of like I think vindicates I think what we wanted originally to do with the comic. But it would have been nice if I could have finished it.
Is that so? Is that something like, with them coming back? Is that you get much of a heads up, or they're just like, hey, like this is it's coming back?
Yeah, no, I got a lot of heads up because they weren't sure if they were going to be able to resurrect it from the dead, and but then they talked to me about it and warned me that it might come back in the new YA format, and then asked me if I'd be interested in writing a 6 page short for it, like a new one, a new story
Yeah.
for Ben to draw that could go in it. And so I think they've really given it a lot of attention and a lot of care. And I'm really, kind of happy to see that at least to somebody, it still matters.
Right. And getting to go back into this world, is that something that like excites you? Like when you said you didn't get to finish the story you wanted to tell, and now you're getting to at least get to live in this universe again for a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because you get when you're writing something, you are not just writing it once, you're writing it over and over and over again. So you get sick of yourself after a while. So the closest you can have to experiencing your own work as a reader
Mm.
is to leave something and not think about it for like years and then come back and read it again for the first time. And I think for me, that was kind of the real value of this exercise is going back and looking at Prez again for the first time for years, kind of how I would as a reader, and actually being kind of pleasantly surprised at how much I liked it. So I thought, when I was going to do that, I thought, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to cringe. I'm going to think, oh, I would never do that now, which is true to a degree. But for the most
Yeah.
part, I understand why it still like lurks in people's imaginations because there's just a lot of like creativity and a lot of like ideas in there that maybe didn't get fully explored, but that were clearly there on the page. I think what stands out to me is how excited I was to write a comic book
Yeah.
and how much I think love went into the pages. And I'm still glad that that holds up, at least to me and to my eyes, 8 years later.
Yeah, I was always curious about that as a creator. Like, it's got to be sometimes weird to like go back and read your work. Like, I know as I'm constantly having to listen to myself talk when I'm editing these videos, and I'm like, I sound like a moron. Like, I don't know how to have a conversation with somebody. But is it that kind of experience for you, like at all? Of like, you don't like to look at your past work, or sometimes you're like, this is a fun
I
experience.
try not to look at it
Okay.
precisely for that reason because I don't want it to, I want it to give a chance to sort of recover in, my conscious. So I go through the phase of like when I'm writing something, it seems exciting and new, and I think the ideas I'm coming up with are good, and then I'm rewriting it, and I'm coming up with better ideas, or I'm shooting down old ideas, but I get to rewrite it so much that by the time I'm done, I have no idea. I have no idea if this is good or not, or if this is worthwhile. I'm sick of it myself,
Yeah.
and so when by the time it actually comes out in print, the last thing I want to do is read it.
Yes.
So I usually just sort of forget about it. And then occasionally, somebody will post something online, or they'll maybe when the trade comes out like a year later, I'll read that. And yeah, I think that's kind of the moment where I am able to sort of best judge my own work after I've
Okay.
been away from it for a while and I see it for the first time in a long time. And in this case, this is the longest I've ever gone between creating something and reading it again for the first time. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Another thing though, too, that happened this year, was you ventured into one of your first Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Uh, how was that experience for you going from always doing these direct to market books and things like that to then, hey, I'm gonna create my own thing and crowdfund it?
Yeah, it was fun. I had a good time. Not as much fun fulfilling the rewards as
Yes.
taking the money. Uh, but yeah, it was still a really good experience, and I'd do it again. In fact, I'm planning on doing a second book at some point. Either in 2024 or 2025. But yeah, I think what I really wanted was to create something that I could bring to the conventions that not everybody would have. Because a lot of
Mhm.
times I'll go to the conventions and I'll be selling books at my table, and everybody will, people will come up who already have everything at the table. And I feel like almost like I've let them down in some way. It's like, oh, I don't have anything new for you. So this way, I feel like I will almost always have something that they haven't seen before,
Yeah.
something that I can sort of talk to them about. So I like that. I like having sort of something at my table at the convention that I can talk to somebody about that's new, and they're not just standing there with some things for me to sign. There's actually something for them to like look at, and I get to see them flip through the pages and enjoy one of my books for the first time right in front of me.
That's cool. That's something I guess I never would have thought that's an issue for you because literally you have a book out every week. It's like, but
Yeah, I can't fit them all on the tables. I don't usually bring them all so I usually sort of focus on the new stuff, and people generally have that.
yeah. And because I remember last time we were talking, like I did the whole interview and I was like, anything else you're working on? You're like, yeah, I got like, I'm on the third issue of the second volume of My Bad. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm currently reading that right now. I was like, what an idiot. But you've been doing a lot of stuff. Like you wrapped up last year with the My Bad. We're getting to see a little bit, visiting that again with Acid Chimp and Business Dog here. Something like that, where it's you're taking two properties, obviously it's with the same publisher for you, but they're two different stories. What was that like of coming up with this is an idea you wanted to have? Was this something that Ahoy kind of went approached you? And because I know you work with Bryce with this as well. So
Yeah, yeah, it was something that Ahoy came up with, and Bryce and I both sort of took it on as sort of a challenge, because it seemed like a really hard writing assignment because these are both animal characters who would never interact, neither of whom speaks, and they have and only one of them really has any sort of agency.
yeah,
The whole point of the business dog character is that he doesn't do anything really except for eat dog food, and that he's built his entire business empire around eating out of the right bowl of dog food, which creates the investments that make him rich. Whereas Acid Chimp, just wants to throw acid on things and usually doesn't get to. So it was really hard to create a story in which these two animals sort of work together, or one, to create an excuse for them to come in contact with each other, and two, it's like once they do come in contact with each other, what then? What do you do with them? So we split the story in half, with Bryce writing the first half about Acid Chimp and how he comes to be at Billionaire Island, and I wrote the second half about why he's on Billionaire Island, and what happens there. And basically, what I came up with is like he is that the billionaires on Billionaire Island want to get rid of Business Dog, because he's the richest mammal, and he sort of the as a result he's the one in charge of the island. So they think if they bring an acid flinging chimp to the island and give it to him as a gift, that the acid chimp will do to business dog what they have been unable to do, and assassinate him. Things do not go according to plan, as
Right.
you might guess. But that was sort of I'm actually kind of proud at how we landed the plane, considering what a weird and tough writing assignment it was that we drew. But yeah, it was not an idea that either of us had or would have had in a million years.
But is that something that as a creator, like you kind of enjoy those challenges sometimes of where you're like, oh, how do I make this work?
Yeah, sometimes that's kind of fun. I encounter that a lot too when I'm writing inventory titles, or I'm writing like backup stories
Mm.
for big two. It's one of the appeal, other than the fact that it's sort of a quick and easy paycheck. One of the things
Yeah.
that appeals to me about those stories is that the premise is already sort of created for you. It's really, you're just coming in and you're telling a story within like these limited prompts. It reminds me of being, when I was a beginning writer, like being in a writing group and getting writing prompts, and sort of you know things like that. And it is kind of fun. I treat it more like a slumber party than being at work when I get one of those assignments.
Yeah. And to continue with again your stuff that you're talking about of all these things, one of the big news, I'm for me at least, and I'm assuming a lot of people, was recently is announced that you're coming back with another Dark Age, not another Dark Age, another book, Batman Dark Age, because you just last year did Superman Space Age. What can you tell us about Batman Dark Age?
Yeah, so if you liked Superman Space Age, Batman Dark Age is kind of a similar premise in
Yeah.
that, it's one of these other universes very similar to our own that's going to be destroyed in 1985 by the Anti-Monitor. So it feeds into Crisis on Infinite Earths. But this one is told through the perspective of Batman and how he's preoccupied with saving Gotham and making Gotham into the city his father wanted it to be, and against the challenges of like, well, he can't get anyone in the Justice League to help him because they're so preoccupied with the threats that like Brainiac and
Mm.
the Anti-Monitor pose to Earth. And so about him trying to find enough people around him in Gotham to help save Gotham from the powers that are trying to destroy it, which in this case is Wayne Enterprises. Wayne Enterprises is actively cannibalizing Gotham for its own bottom line, and he has to like not only save Gotham, but he has to do it by fighting the very company that his father created.
Is that a, as a writer, as creative, I know you're a big fan of who Superman is and what Superman represents and trying to write that, the idea of Superman, is how is it then for you to have to switch, because Batman's a completely different style character than Superman, in prepping for this story.
Yeah, I think that the big difference is that Superman is came from out of space. He was a refugee and was like, but was raised with love. Was raised by people who loved him and surrounded by people who cared for him. Batman has kind of the opposite origin. He started out like very much about as much of a he won the lottery of birth. You know,
Yeah.
he's born in the right place, the right time, to rich and loving parents who are taken from him almost immediately, and then he's surrounded by violence and threats. And so it's about how do you Superman's journey is one from like how do you go from being a good person with good instruction to becoming a great person, to becoming a person who knows how to use their powers responsibly. Batman kind of goes the opposite way, where it's like he starts with a person with a great wealth, great powers right out of the gate, but he has to learn how to become a good person, how to like make that work within the framework of his humanity because he's surrounded by so much violence and tragedy.
Is this in the, I'm guessing in the same type of format that Space Age was, of the 3 issue, 80 pages?
A little different. We're going to
Okay.
break this one into 6 issues of 40 pages. So ultimately, the collection will be the same length as Superman, but it will be divided into 6 stories as opposed to three.
And is our Mike and Laura, our team, all coming back together for this?
Yeah,
So
all the same team, and yeah, and there are the characters from the Justice League that were in the Superman Space Age will all make appearances in Batman Dark Age too, and so there will feel like this is like continuity, which is by design. We want this to feel like very much like a continuation of the other story, even though it takes place in a different universe.
Yeah. I'm assuming that the creative team's going to be a little bit happier that they're not doing the ages at a time and a little bit more
Yeah,
spaced out.
no, I think that's one of the reason why we broke into six is it's a little more manageable for all concerned, and also it's a little easier on I think the public to buy an issue for $5 as opposed to 10, and to have them come out like on like a semi-monthly basis as opposed to like a quarterly basis be a little easier for people to keep up.
Yeah. How quickly into the I'm assuming that writing Superman Space Age that you were like you're in that world, you're like, what other stories could I tell and expand off of this? Like how quickly in did you come up with like I want to tackle Batman?
Yeah, well, I think we pretty early on in the process of doing because there was a lot of stuff I wanted to write about Batman and include in Superman Space Age, but I just didn't have the room. It was a Superman book,
Right.
and I already had included a lot of Batman in it. So yeah, I think we knew early on we really need to do a whole other book about Batman. And when Superman Space Age, turned out to be sort of acclaimed and popular enough to warrant a second book, that was the idea we immediately had, and now we're thinking hopefully we'll be able to do a trilogy. They'll be able to do a third one with Wonder Woman in the third part.
It's so cool to, you know, you have a lot of stories that you've told that you've been able to tell and coming back to them, right? Like this one, and it's there's something about characters that feel familiar. And we've all read Batman, we've all read Superman, but having the whole team back together, I think is going to make it feel special because it's a world that we're familiar with and used to, and it's got to be a fun thing to write though too.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing about writing in sort of these adjacent universes is that people will recognize the characters when they come back. I understand that my version of the character is a little different than what is like sort of the DC canon, but these characters will be very similar to the ones that you left in Superman Space Age. So in a way, it's sort of creating an alternate DC canon, so, in which I hope that if I could see myself or see the team like 4 or 5 years from now, I'm hoping that we just keep able to keep doing new and more entries of this type of book in the DC universe. That they basically just let us create a pocket DC universe
Yeah.
around Super Space Age.
Well, I mean, because I feel like the moment we see Flash on in Batman Dark Age, will be like, oh, there's Mark Russell's Flash. There's Mike and Laura's Flash in this. Like,
Yeah, I would love to do like a Flash centric book at some point.
be
Just a
so
book about Flash, like trying to keep himself busy, keep himself from being bored, and then maybe like 1 page out of 20, he actually like saves the world, and then he's back to like making sculptures out of his popsicle sticks or thinking of ways to fill his day.
be so good. And to keep with this kind of you talking about where you're working on something and you're coming back and getting to explore it. Last time we did an interview, issue one of your third arc of Second Coming was coming out. It was getting excited. That arc was fantastic for me. I thought you, I thought you brought home the story in a wonderful way that needed to happen, and I was a little sad because I was like, ah, it's going to be over. But you say at the end that there's more to come. Is that still the case that you're still trying to work on some Second Coming stuff?
There is more to come. Yeah, in fact, we are already a third of the way through, or at least I'm a third of the way through the next season of Second Coming. So there's going to be at least one more volume of Second Coming. I'm hoping for at least two more volumes. So yeah, there will definitely be more Second Coming on the way.
How do you as a writer and a creative, balance all these different books? Because like you're coming up, all these things are coming up at the same time, it seems like, and maybe it's just how they're coming publishing. How do you keep all the ducks in a row to go from, okay, I'm writing Batman, you know, Dark Age right now, to writing a Second Coming style of story? Is it spaced out more than we would think, or not really?
Actually, I find it kind of helps me working on multiple things at the same time and multiple things that are very different from each other. because you just sort of exhaust that sort of DC brain space after a while, or you just feel like you're beating your head against the wall. So if you go write some Second Coming, it's like that part of your brain hasn't been, is fresh. And then when you're done writing an issue or two of Second Coming, then you're ready to come back and write some more Batman. So I really like writing very different things at the same time.
That's an interesting thing because they are completely different styles, and you know and especially like something like to go from Rumpus Room to Traveling to Mars, I feel like are completely different books too. um which we haven't talked about either of those. Again, this is stuff there's so many things out there, and it's so good. How was it getting to go back with AWA with Rumpus Room? I know you were there originally with Not All Robots. It's where you guys won the Eisner with that and things, and then you're like, boom, let's hit them with the Rumpus Room.
Yeah, they're really fun to work with because they really get sort of high concept science fiction, and I think they also really enjoy the sort of irreverent attitude that we bring to science fiction. I think a lot of people would be sort of put off by that. In fact, I've never had a pitch that was harder to sell than Not All Robots. That was like the pitch that everybody was rejecting. So the fact that they took a chance on that, and then they took a chance on Rumpus Room, which sounds like an equally bad idea, to me is like this is like a company I would like to work for, more in the future, because they really get that a lot of times the ideas that sound a little sketchy or off-putting, or maybe where that you're gonna get the best sort of most original stories.
Yeah. And if people haven't gotten to Rumpus Room, I think what, 4 issues are out right now? There's still one more.
Yeah, fifth. I think the fifth issue comes out this month. But the finale, it's five total of 5 issues.
Okay. I remember when you pitched the idea of, you're like, this is just a billionaire has a Rumpus Room. They throws people in that get in his way, and they makes them into a nice face screen.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's again, it doesn't, it's not a real strong pitch. It's like if you're pitching that to somebody, they're like, tell me that last part again. He does this why? Oh, he turns them into an amazing face cream that keeps them looking young.
Yeah.
Uh, which is obviously a metaphor for what is actually happening in the billionaire economy,
Yeah.
and not too far from the truth actually. Uh, but but yeah, it's the sort of thing that I think a lot of comedy is big and small, where you're expecting something big to happen and something really small happens. So the idea that he has these human prisoners and they're being crushed in this chair, and they're being kept against their will underground, and then it's all just to make toiletries. It's like sort of just inherently funny to me. Uh, that it's also was kind of intended as like a dark parable for American democracy, where it's like you are here to be one by one crushed and turned into skin cream for a billionaire, but we'll give you the right to vote on who the next person to be crushed is, which I feel like in a lot of ways is what the American Republic in the 20th and 21st century has become. It's like our powers of democracy are kind of limited to who the next person to go into the chair is going to be, and because we realize we are so powerless to control our fate in any meaningful way, we then begin to try to control it in the ways that are destructive to each other. We try to basically just decide who the losers are going to be, because we don't feel like we have the power to create a system whereby everybody wins.
How much is it when you're coming up with an idea like this? Does real life, something like Rumpus Room, where do you sit there and go, how can I take this type of situation in the world and put my Mark Russell, spin on it, like you said,
Well,
like,
that's the easy part. I can't help but write a Mark Russell story. It's the only thing I'm really capable of. So, yeah, a lot of it is just sort of trial and error. It's about how
okay.
I imagine somebody writes a song. They just sit with the guitar and sort of put some notes together, maybe a chord, and eventually they find something that works. And so for me, I just start with a general concept, like, oh, a billionaire keeps people in his rumpus room, and so he can harvest them later. And then I just start tinkering around with that, and the story eventually just sort of writes itself.
And is that something that, like, you have these ideas that you're kind of like, as you're out in the world, that you're like, I wonder if I could take this concept, of billionaires, of this American republic that we live in, of, not being able to vote, like, how can I can I add something to that and tell a story like that? Is do you have just ideas like that come up to you and you start to go with it, or is it just something that you pocket away for?
Yeah, a lot of both. And I think that it's a good idea, or at least it's an idea that you can make a book out of if it's got a multiplier effect. I
Okay.
mean, if you have a really good idea, but it's just one idea and it doesn't really go anywhere, then maybe that's an idea for a short story, or maybe that's an idea for a single issue. But if you have an idea that like gives you other ideas, then that's probably a series or a book. And this is definitely one of those ideas that gave me other ideas. Who would be in the rumpus room?
Mhm.
Why? What sort of guy this would be? Why he would, feel like he was justified in basically cannibalizing people for this incredibly minor benefit, and which leads me to think about his worldview and stuff. So
Mhm.
it really was a story that got me thinking about other ideas beyond the initial story, which I always really those are the ones I like to like turn into books.
Yeah. Is is the process harder or different, like from doing something like Rumpus Room to traveling to Mars, where traveling to Mars feels like, we've been like, we've had multiple arcs of Second Coming and things like that, but this seems like it's your longest ongoing of like monthly that we're getting of a, I talked to you last time and it was like 3 issues out when I talked. I was like, oh man, you're just wrecking me emotionally. Lo and behold, I didn't even know it was about what you're about to
Yeah,
do.
it's probably the most deeply personal thing I've written, and yeah, it's at 11 issues, which is a weird number, but they tell all one story. It's not
Yeah.
going to be like a lot of the series where it's in arcs or I can build onto it. When it's done, it's done. It will be sort of my Romana Clef, when it's all finished, and and it's a very different writing than writing something like Second Coming or Batman or something. In that uh, this is just a story I had to give birth to, and when it's done, it's done. And I feel like it is a unique flavor. It is different than the other things I'm writing because it is mostly just sort of about a person being left alone with their own sort of feelings and thoughts and regrets about the life they've left behind on Earth. But I also feel like in a lot of ways it's maybe the best thing I've ever written.
Yeah. I have seen people on best of the year shows as of late that everywhere I look, traveling to Mars pops up onto that, and I think it's a testament to the story. It's not Ablaze isn't the biggest publisher. It's not something of like a character that we are familiar with, so it is standing on the story and the creative team, the art and stuff alone. I think so. It is a testament to rightfully saying it's one of your best works.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the advantages of going with a company like Ablaze is that they don't pressure you to conform to university, to these industry standards. You can
Yeah.
make the story as a weird number of issues. You can have gaps between issues to like take time to do them right, and you can tell the kind of story you want as opposed to like having to make something all about cliffhangers and car chases and and things. You can tell a story that's just sort of deeply human, which I really like.
And you still have that very scientific sci-fi feel to the story that you wanted to tell, but you could do it like you said without having to have space battles and stuff. And I
Yeah,
think
there's a
there
space battle, and it's sort of the humor is that it's so anticlimactic because it's not like at all you would see in like Star Wars or anything. It's just these two ships, one slowly converging on the other for weeks, and just the guy in the front ship knows it's going to catch up to him eventually, and so but it's him like sitting down eating breakfast, watching his pursuers slowly catch up to him.
how like I'm not a science guy. Like how much like research did you do of like how would this actually work in a space battle? Or you're just like, I think
Yeah,
this
well,
would be it.
I mean, a lot of it is, sort of. I did a lot of research for a lot of the science about Mars itself
Okay.
and how you would land on Mars or live on Mars, and but yeah, a lot of it is just like sort of fundamental physics, which is like most space flight. It's not like you're like you see in like cartoons and stuff where somebody's just blasting their engine and whipping around and like a race car or something.
Right.
Burn your fuel at to create your trajectory and your speed, and then you just sort of coast for like 99% of the journey. And so there's not a lot of, you can't really slam on the brakes and turn around or hide behind an asteroid.
Right.
So you just sort of have to set your trajectory and get close enough. And that's the way these spaceships are designed, to get close enough to the other craft that you can then manipulate these giant arms that come out of the craft to sort of destroy it. And if you throw some, because the trajectories have to be so precise, if you throw somebody's trajectory off a little bit, then they're basically just heading out into the darkest space. They're going to miss you. They're going to miss Mars. They're going to miss everything, and just go out into the oblivion.
I I remember reading that and I was just like, because I'd never seen something like that, and I was like, that's brilliant. I am going to be sad when that wraps up, just because I've, it's a book that I've gotten to read for the past what, year and a half, it feels like. And
Yeah, no, it's been going on forever, because we've taken some time between issues sometimes, which I'm not complaining about, because I think
no, no, no.
Rob's artwork is like totally justifies taking some time with it.
Yeah. So, well, Mark, I obviously I could talk to you forever. That's why I keep bringing you on the show. But I want to respect your time. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to mention real quick? That I
Yes,
forgot about?
definitely.
Yeah.
My cursed series Dead Box, which
Yes.
ran with Vault and got interrupted for about 2 years in the middle of the series, but it's finally coming out in its entirety. It's in trade paperback now, so please look up Dead Box. It's about a town with a cursed DVD rental machine, where the movies seem to know more about the lives of the people in the town than they do. And it was like one of the creepiest and sort of most fun things I've ever had the opportunity to write. So I hope I hope you will check it out. Dead Box.
You said this. So you said the completed trade is out, because what, did only like 3 or 4 issues?
5 issues, but
Okay.
only issues 1 and 3 came out, and then we had a 2 year gap in the series. So issues 4 and 5 are only in the trade.
Okay.
So uh, if you get the trade, you'll get the complete series.
Good, because I remember that was one that it snuck under my radar, and I got the single issues, and then didn't know what happened. And now I know. Now we get it. So
Right.
well, great. So, gang, again, if you're not picking up Mark's stuff, shame on you. But where can people follow along with you of what you're working on, when you had announcements and things like that?
Well, if you want to look at peruse my bibliography, feel free to come on over to markrussellbooks.com. Otherwise, I'm on social media. I'm on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram. Not very active on the old Twitter anymore.
I feel like that's the way a lot of us comic folks have become. So, but
Yeah, but Blue Sky's great. If you're into comics, that's where a lot of the creators seem to be most active.
yeah, I've been seeing that a lot with Blue Sky and Threads. Is I'm getting a lot of interaction on those of with creators and things like that. So it's been fun, kind of just recreating my own little comic bubble.
Yeah, I feel like social media has become fun again, just
Yeah,
because more positive and more creator centric and more people just sort of talking about their interests on, like, especially on Blue Sky, I think, but also Threads.
yeah. Uh, Real quick, we mentioned Batman Dark Age. When is that coming out? In spring?
March. Yeah.
March.
So
Yeah.
issue number 1 drops in March.
So,
I think
gang,
March 14th. I don't remember the exact date, but in March.
yes, I'm so excited. So go pick up books, check them out, and then Mark, I look forward to talking with you again next year.
Sounds good.
All
All
right.
right. Talk
Hey,
to you later, Greg.